Jonah 1. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because their evil has come up before me. Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the Lord's presence. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the Lord's presence.
All right, guys, so having preached Jonah at two different churches, I think Jonah 1 is more of a bear of a text than we realize. And so I want to bring out what might be a hidden bear. And maybe we could argue that a hidden bear is even more dangerous than one that you know where it is, right?
Not more dangerous than a she-bear.
That's true. So to highlight this hidden bear, I want to ask a question. Why did Jonah run?
I would say that he didn't want to see those people repent in Nineveh.
Yeah, I don't think he liked the Ninevites very much.
So that's the surprise ending that we learn in chapter 4, okay? And that's true. It was a prejudice against the Ninevites, but you haven't answered my question. That's why Jonah was disobedient. That's why Jonah did not go to Nineveh.
Oh.
The question was, why did Jonah
to get away from
run?
God is what it said, right?
That's what it says. But that is pretty strange if we know good Jewish theology. And so, question is, the hidden bear, why did Jonah run?
Best boys Bible Study Fantastica. Best boys Bible Study Fantastica.
Welcome to Bears Boys Bible Study Fantastica. We are the boys,
Jason Allen,
Sean Walker,
Shan Taylor.
and we are going to handle a bear of a text, and we hope that out of that comes fantastic Bible study.
Absolutely. We are three pastors, and our goal and our mission in this is to help equip you as the church to be able to study your Bible well. More than just being a podcast about weird and strange, text in the Bible. We want it to be a podcast about biblical hermeneutics, which is what are the principles needed to be able to understand a text and what's going on. And so we're going to take the text, we're going to use those principles, we're going to teach you those principles, and then the goal, obviously, is so you can take those principles and apply it as you study God's Word yourself.
All right. So before we begin to handle this bear of a text, I want to do something. It's a little bit of a test or a trial. I don't know.
I don't like tests.
I don't know how it's going to work out, okay? It is, I want us to do a surprise sponsorship. This is our 4th episode. We don't have any sponsors. We don't have anybody, okay?
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to surprise sponsorship the restaurant where we ate lunch today and see, A, do they even know that it exists? Are they aware of this sponsorship? And then B, what is it worth to them, okay? They're going to set the market value of an ad on our podcast.
Right.
So is an ad on our
gosh.
podcast worth a free appetizer? $7.99? Maybe? I don't know. We'll find out. So between my church and Jason's church, I'd say this entire restaurant is employees of one of those two churches, pretty much, right?
A lot of them, yes.
Yeah. And so the restaurant is the Wild Olive.
The Wild Olive here in Crestview.
Here in Crestview. The family that owns it, about half of them come to my church, about half of them go to your church.
Yep.
Right? And it's a great family. We love them dearly. You guys like them?
We love the McDuffies.
Okay,
absolutely.
great. Yeah. And so I don't know.
In fact, to go even further, one of the McDuffies is on your staff,
That's
and one
true.
of them is on my staff.
That's true.
So,
I don't know for sure that Joey and Rachel, if they listen to this podcast or not. I haven't heard if they do. And so the question is, will they even be aware of this sponsorship? But I have, even before I had this idea of doing a surprise sponsorship, I have regularly said to people, the Wild Olive is the best restaurant in Crestview.
100%, yeah.
So what did we get for lunch today? And how was it?
We got a smash burger with some sausage on top of it.
It was the special for the...
It was a special for the day. And yeah, it was pretty amazing. I'm pretty much looking forward to eating my leftovers tonight for dinner. So
I liked it so much, I don't have leftovers.
All right.
Actually, I want to say one thing about them.
Yeah.
They offer sweet potato fries as an alternative without an upcharge. Normally, when you get them, you have to pay like $3 extra, and they're really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're looking for good eats in Crestview, Wild Olive is the place to go.
it is.
I guess they have a website or something. That would have been something to look up before, but Anyway, I know they have a website because I've ordered food through it before, but I'm not sure what it is. But you know how to use Google. So that's the promo spot for the Wild Olive. Number 1, will Joey and Rachel hear it? Number 2, will it get us a free lunch? That's the question. I don't know. So we'll see how that goes. Now let's get to our text. So in Jonah, at least in chapter 1, I think we are confident how to teach this to elementary school kids, but not to adults. I think if you sat down and said, you've got to teach 2nd grade Jonah 1, you go, I know exactly what I'm going to teach. But then whenever we are presenting it to adults, everyone's instinct, and you guys demonstrated this, is to jump to chapter 4 when you're preaching chapter 1. And I would say, don't do that. I think chapter 4 is meant to be a surprise ending, and you're giving away the surprise ending at the beginning of the story. And so what hermeneutical principle would help us to see what I think is more of the primary point of chapter 1 within our 7 categories: the history of the text, the genre of the text, the location of the text, the structure of the text, the language of the text, the theology of the text, and the application of the text. We're going to look at category number 1, the history of the text. Generally, what are some questions we should ask when it comes to the history of the text?
Well, if you've got a couple of different nations, he's being called to the Assyrians. I mean, your first question would be like, who are these people? Who are the Assyrians? What are they about? What time frame are we talking about here? All of those things would be valuable to know.
Yeah. What's their relationship with the Assyrians? Like, what's Jonah's relationships? What's the Israelites' relationship with the Assyrians? Is there animosity that has existed before that time? Has Assyria invaded Israel before? I mean, I could think of some more, but
yeah,
I'll let you have some, I guess.
Sure.
Ultimately, what would make Jonah want to run away from this assignment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the real question.
That's good. Okay, so here's some principles underneath this first category. Category 1, say 1A, the text was written to a specific recipient in a specific circumstance. Meaning, what's going on for the original audience? Why was this message important to them? Why would that be helpful? 1B, the author wrote with a purpose and a goal according to the circumstances of the recipient. He knows what's going on, and he thinks he has something to say to them. 1C, the meaning of the text is understood according to the recipient's worldview and cultural context. This is what makes it difficult for us because we live in a different time, a different cultural context. We have a different worldview. So we oftentimes have to put ourselves into their circumstance, into their historical situation so that we can understand the purpose and the meaning. 1D, many circumstances of the writing are assumed as common knowledge between the author and the recipient. So we're going through 1 Corinthians with my church right now, and part of the issue with an epistle is you have to kind of put together the missing pieces because he did not need to tell them what's going on in their church. They already know what's going on in their church. And so he's instead addressing the issue without first explaining what the issue is. That's often the situation in a biblical writing. And then principle 1E, which is what we're going to focus on today. Many cultural practices and societal norms are assumed as common knowledge between the author and the recipient. With any text, there is likely some assumed common knowledge that because of our cultural distance from the text can no longer be assumed. Meaning we need it spelled out for us where the original audience did not need it spelled out for them. Okay? And so where can you study this topic? There's a book called Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes by Richards and O'Brien. And that's a very interesting book. It helps you to understand how when you're going cross cultures, oftentimes there's assumed cultural practices and societal norms that you don't know about, and so you're missing important information, okay? It's not necessarily specifically about, well, what would those things be in the Bible, but it helps you to recognize that you are viewing the world through your worldview lenses.
Right.
And we need to view the Bible through biblical worldview lenses in order to understand it fully. Okay, so that being said, where then would we find this historical information that was a common knowledge for the original recipient, but we are missing out on? Where would you suggest people look for that stuff?
The first would be the Bible. The Bible can interpret itself.
For sure.
Yeah, it has a lot of good historical background, but obviously there's plenty of plenty of commentaries have good historical things. Sometimes like a survey of the Old Testament or New Testament has some of those things included, where people have taken the raw elements, if you will, of history and kind of boiled it down into something manageable. I say all those are good tools. Yeah,
Ancient writings.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure their culture had writings and they collected those. So
Yeah. So both of these things that these resources that you've just mentioned are usually pastoral level, scholarly level. A pastor is going to have a commentary set, but a layperson less likely to have that. But so those are great resources. But a lay level or just a common level of resource that any Christian could own and it would be valuable to them.
the internet.
Not what I was going to say.
Okay.
Not what I was going to say.
come on, you can find everything on the internet.
Okay,
Shan.
wait. Is it in this room?
What?
The thing you're talking
internet?
about. No, the thing you're talking about.
They're sitting in front of you. And
Am I
Jason.
touching one
Yes,
right now?
absolutely.
Okay,
That's
good.
correct.
Is it a study Bible?
It is a study Bible. You guys are prepared and ready.
And a Bible dictionary.
Yeah, I would say that every Christian who wants to take studying their Bible seriously needs to own one or two good study Bibles. And I think another great secondary resource is a Bible dictionary. I would actually recommend this one. They've got an updated version, but the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, solid. This is the CSB Study Bible. The ESV is a great one. The Zondervan NIV one is a good one. Those are good resources that give you the historical information that is missing, that was assumed between the original author and the original recipient, that is not spelled out for us, that we need to be spelled out for us.
Yeah. I thought you were talking about primary sources at first. Like, how do Bible scholars understand? Okay. But now, I agree with you.
Okay, great. So let me say it again. Principle 1E. Many cultural practices and societal norms are assumed as common knowledge between the author and the recipient. But this is not surprising. We do this all the time. If you started a movie and the first thing you see is people in colonial clothes and they're chanting, "Throw the tea into the sea," as Americans, you immediately know what's the context.
That's the Boston
movie.
Tea Party. Yeah.
It's
The context is a movie.
yes. I'm going to turn off your microphone. What?
The Boston Tea
The
Party.
Boston Tea
Yeah.
Party, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We learned about that very early in elementary school, and we know that phrase. And so the person who's making that movie does not need a long title screen to explain the background behind that, because that's assumed cultural knowledge between the recipient, the creator of the movie, and the audience.
But if you were to take that same movie and go to India or China or somewhere
To a
like
different culture.
they would be like, what the heck are you doing?
We don't know,
Throwing
right.
tea into the sea. What's going on here?
So if that common knowledge is truly common, then the audience immediately knows, oh, I'm watching a movie about the Revolutionary War. You don't have to spell it out. Let me first say, why does this happen? Why is there assumed common knowledge between the author and the recipients? It's because it would be boring and unnecessary to spell out everything that the original audience already knows. It would be unnecessary for us to have to read a
Do it
paragraph
every single time. Yeah.
about the Revolutionary War or the Boston Tea Party. We can just jump into that part and go, I know what's going on. The second reason is the high cost of the written word in antiquity. We don't think about this because paper is cheap, ink is cheap. We all know how to write and read, but to write anything in the ancient world was incredibly expensive. For Paul to write 1 Corinthians cost thousands of dollars in today's terminology, okay? The same would even be true of Jonah, a shorter book. It's something that only someone who is highly skilled and trained, who has expensive materials and can spend time working on it. So that means every word costs you money. So you're not giving extra words.
Nope.
If there is assumed common knowledge, you're going to let that be assumed and save the money.
Yeah.
If that's why there is assumed common knowledge, what do we do? Where do we start? It's such an enormous topic. Just be a student of history. Okay, what periods of history?
Part of history, yeah.
What people groups? What nations?
Well, I thought we started with getting a study Bible. I thought that was
That is a
okay. Good.
that is a good place to start. Yes. Also, the text gives us the place to start. The questions that you already asked earlier are the who, what, when, where behind the text. And when you know those things, that reveals the why. Who is Jonah? What is he called to do? What does he do? What does he not do? When is this happening? What do we know about Nineveh at the time? And when we start answering these large categories, we start to begin to also identify the holes in our knowledge. And we go, now I see potentially where I need to do some further research. I see what was the assumed common knowledge. Did the author of Jonah, which is maybe Jonah or it's passed down from Jonah. There are things in Jonah that only Jonah would know. So it originates with Jonah. Maybe it's recorded later. Maybe Jonah wrote it down. We don't know. It doesn't stay. So let's just say Jonah to make it simple. Did Jonah take the time to give us a history of Nineveh?
No.
So the original audience, it was assumed they know something about Nineveh, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of these things are assumed common knowledge. Thankfully, study Bibles are where scholars have done all the hard work for us and supplied that they know us and our culture, and they know them and their culture, and they know where our holes in knowledge are, and they fill in those holes. That's the whole point of the study notes, is they go, hey, you're missing some important information. Let me spell it out for you. As an example of answering those who, what, when, where questions, Sean's going to read just a small section from a study Bible on the introductory material for the book of Jonah.
All right, it says, Jonah appears in 2 Kings 14:25 as a prophet from Gath Hefer, or Hefer. It does not.
Jason?
I'm not a Hebrew scholar.
Okay. In the territory of Zebulun in northern Israel. He was active around the first half of the 8th century BC. Jonah predicted the restoration of the northern kingdom's boundaries. This occurred during the reign of Jeroboam II, which was 793 to 753 BC. This book about Jonah could have been composed at any time from the 8th century to the end of the Old Testament period. Jonah preached to the city of Nineveh. Nineveh was a major city of the Assyrians, a cruel and warlike people who were longtime enemies of Israel. Assyrian artwork emphasizes war, including scenes of execution, impalement, flaying the skin off prisoners, and beheadings. This just got PG.
Wow,
All right.
wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah, do not let your kids listen to this one, guys. This explains Jonah's reluctance to preach to the infamous city of Nineveh.
There we go. So, and actually, historical documents give us much more graphic description of the Assyrians than that. The king of Assyria at this time has a pile of skulls next to his throne, and they are the skulls of the kings that he's defeated. Not just anybody. I don't want just anybody's skull next to my throne. It's got to be a king's skull, okay? And it's more
pretty intense.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah,
there's
Do they know that because it had the crown on the skull still?
I'm not sure. I think he probably kept track of whose skull was next to his throne.
I wonder if they wrote on anyway.
Maybe. And so there's a long list of, they didn't just skin people alive. They didn't want to hang the skins on the walls. So those are coming up. They would make family members. They were described as a terrorist nation, meaning they didn't want to just defeat people in battle. They wanted to do it in such a gruesome and brutal way that nobody would ever think of revolting against them. Yeah. And so I could give you a lot more gruesome details than that, but suffice it to say, the assumed reason that the audience would have immediately thought of is, well, no, he's scared. He doesn't want to die a gruesome, torturous death.
Yeah.
And that's a reasonable assumption.
Makes sense.
Now, we are going to get to the end in chapter 4, and we're going to learn that it's more than that. That's the twist ending. It's his prejudice against them. He doesn't want them to be saved, and he knows the mercy of God and assumes that they will be saved if God is merciful, if they repent. But don't give away the twist ending. Keep it. So let it be a surprise for when you get there, okay? Mm-hmm. The first assumption is he's scared, and that makes sense. That tells us why he was disobedient, why he didn't go to Nineveh, but it still doesn't answer my first question. Why did he run?
Why did he run? Yeah.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So that's a good starting place. As we work through our text, we're going to get some more details, some more clues that's going to answer that question for us, okay? So I'm going to read again, verses 1 through 3. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, Go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, and their evil, for their evil has come up against me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish. So the thing about Jonah is he always does what's least expected of him. This introduction is the very typical introductory call of a prophet. And normally a prophet is called and he obeys the call, but Jonah does the opposite. And so the regular thing about Jonah is he does the opposite of what we expect him to do. So he rose and he flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare, and he went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Okay, so being good readers, just paying attention to what's obvious and right in front of us, what do we notice?
Away from the presence of the Lord.
We notice repetition. So Tarshish 3 times, down twice, and down will be said a lot in this first chapter, and then from the presence of the Lord twice, and it's also going to get repeated again later in the chapter. Here's a pretty good clue that we have a hole in our assumed cultural knowledge. If we see something repeated, that's always for emphasis. That's the author using an economy of words to communicate some more information. And so it's a big problem if we don't know why those words are significant. And that would give us a clue of where we should do some further study. What cultural practices or societal norms are related to those concepts or to those terms? Well, first we would see that down to Joppa would give us an indication that Jonah is leaving from Jerusalem. Though he's a prophet of the northern kingdom, Joppa would not be the port that he would use if he's leaving from the northern kingdom. And also down is the typical language of leaving from Jerusalem. And so that's significant because we associate Jerusalem with what?
The temple.
The presence of the Lord, which is said twice, right? Okay. Then secondly, Tarshish. Now, for sure, we know from other references in the Old Testament that Tarshish is a distant place across the Mediterranean Sea. But scholars believe that it's not just a distant place, it is the most distant place. It is on the coast of Spain. And that's said 3 times. He's chosen to go as physically far as possible from the presence of the Lord as he can. Instead of going 600 miles northeast to Nineveh, he decides to go 2,000 miles west.
He's Forrest Gumping it over there. He's like, we're gone.
Yeah. The fact that that's repeated 3 times in 3 verses tells us that geography is significant. Okay? Presence of the Lord. Now, this is what we would teach in 2nd grade Sunday school. Hey, kids, just know God's everywhere. You can't run from God. But it can't just be that simple, right? That can't just be the main point of Jonah 1, right? It's got to be something more difficult, because that would go against a core belief of Judaism. What kind of a prophet thinks he can run from the presence of the Lord? Deuteronomy 4:35 says, "To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord is God, that there is no other besides him." Verse 39, "Know therefore today and lay it to your heart that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth beneath, there is no other." What is the most foundational text for all of Judaism? Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." So for Jonah to run seems so strange because it is contrary to like Judaism 101, the first lesson that little children who are Jews would learn.
God's everywhere. Yeah.
But didn't they also have this understanding that the presence of God was unique in the temple and it radiated out of Jerusalem? And like Israel was a place where
I'm not sure it would be radiated in the sense that, so they would say that God's presence is uniquely active in the temple. It is his intentional presence, but also Solomon, when he's building the temple, says, how could I ever build anything that would contain your presence? And so they know there's something special about God's presence in Jerusalem, but they don't believe that that means that God is limited to Jerusalem or that he's not everywhere else.
Yeah.
And so it couldn't be clearer from Scripture that God is everywhere, but Jonah always does the opposite of what we expect. And so is Jonah literally trying to run from the presence of the Lord? That seems strange to us, but the text seems to be giving that indication. Well, how else could we confirm it? Well, we could use another hermeneutical principle, which would be to examine the language of the text, do a word study, which Jason helped us to walk through a couple episodes ago. And here is a tip I would give you for when you're doing a word study. It's not always what is the most common use of this word. Instead, we would want to look at maybe what we would call foundational texts, or maybe landmark texts. And so you would say there are these certain passages in the Old Testament that are more foundational. They're almost like the Bible stories that every child has heard over and over and over and over. And so that's the first place that their mind goes. And so if the word that you're studying is used in one of those foundational texts, well, that usage, and especially if we're on the same theme, that usage is it carries more weight than simple majority usage. Does that make sense? I'll give you an example. The word that we're talking about in Hebrew is panim, and it literally means face. And so the way that word is used most commonly in the Bible would be simply face, but it's also commonly translated presence, which is how it's being used in this text here. Literally, Jonah ran from the face of the Lord, but commonly that is translated as Jonah fled from the presence of the Lord. Well, so is there another time, especially a significant text, where this word is used in that way to describe a sinful moment when someone is fleeing from the presence of the Lord? And the answer is yes. Genesis 3:8, the very first sin.
Yeah.
And they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the panim, the face, from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. It's not the first use of the word, but it's the first use of the word in this sense, and it's certainly a significant moment in the theological history of God's people. And so the reason I bring that up is that any good student of the Bible would hear fleeing from the presence of the Lord and immediately think of Genesis 3:8. And so for them, it wouldn't be strange at all for them to connect fleeing from the presence of the Lord with a literal sin. So is literally running from God's presence a sin? Absolutely, or at least the attempt to do that, right? So then we still have this bear that we've got to wrestle with. If that's what Jonah 1 is actually about, fleeing from the presence of the Lord, the next question we need to answer is, well, why would Jonah think that's possible? Yeah. If they're taught that from the beginning, you can't do it, why does Jonah think that's possible?
Yeah, especially because when you get to the end, he understands that God is merciful. So he knows like the characteristics of God, which would include his omnipresence. So why would he run if he knows he's omnipresent?
Yeah. And the clue is in the geography. Because remember I asked, not why was Jonah disobedient? He could have stayed in Jerusalem and been disobedient, or he could have gone back to Israel and been disobedient. Why did he choose Tarshish? And we've already said, because it's as physically as far as possible from the presence of the Lord. Well, why is that significant? There is an assumed cultural practice behind this, and that's what Jason's going to read for us out of this Bible dictionary, which would give you the missing hole.
Okay.
Fill in that missing hole.
So this is about like pagan gods, and it says here in the dictionary, one of the great distinctives of Judeo-Christian religion is monotheism, the recognition and reverence of only one God. By contrast, pagan religions of the biblical world were polytheistic, worshiping many gods. And then, of course, you come down a little further, and it talks about in the Old Testament, it says most pagan gods began as gods of certain places, such as cities or regions. Such gods, or a combination of gods, became nationalistic symbols as their cities or regions achieved political dominance. A byproduct of this connection between gods and certain locales was the belief that a god's power may be limited to certain regions, and thus officials of the Syrian king advised a battle with Israel on the plains, observing their gods are gods of the hill country. That's a quote from the Old Testament. That's why they were stronger than we were. But let's fight them on the plain. Surely we'll be stronger than them. That's out of 1 Kings 20:23. Israel, against the background of this common belief, struggled with the concept that God was the Lord over all aspects of creation.
There we go.
Not just their region, yeah.
So what is being described in that passage is what is called territorial polytheism, which is this belief in a localized deity.
Yeah.
Meaning, for example, if we think of the Canaanites and what they believed was Baal is the god of the storm. He has power over that specific realm or region of existence, and Yam would be the god of the sea. And so if you're going to go on a boat ride, which is maybe a little bit of foreshadowing about what's happening in Jonah, right? You want to be on the right side of Baal and Yam. So you're going to make sacrifices to Baal because you don't want storms. You're going to make sacrifices to Yam because you want the sea to be on your side, right? And they believe the power of those gods is limited to that realm, to that area. And there would be gods that were limited to a specific city. We have a patron god of our city. And so we make sacrifice to that god because he's powerful here. And if you go to the next city over, this god that we worship is not as powerful over there. Instead, it's their god. So that's called territorial polytheism. And that is what the entire world, except for Jews, believe. Which means there is a cultural practice or societal norm that is an assumed common knowledge between the author and the recipient.
Yeah.
Not many of us today believe in that there's a god of Crestview and then there's a god of Defuniak Springs and there's a god of Freeport, right? That's not how we operate. And so we don't think in those categories.
Well, and even further than that, the Jews, most of their history struggled with that as well.
Yeah.
Even though they, in the book should have been more
They shouldn't have.
monotheistic, they still struggled with that territorial polytheism all the time.
And so I'm arguing that anyone in the ancient world would have seen Jonah's actions and understood them based on the assumed common knowledge of territorial polytheism. Is that what Jonah is supposed to believe? Absolutely not. But does the thinking or the belief of the world ever creep into our minds and our hearts as believers?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You've been trying to say something for a while. And you got
I just
in
want to
there.
get the answers right.
There you go.
My
Gold
mom
star.
will listen to this and be proud of me.
Shout out to Mom.
What's her grandma name? Gmo?
Gigi.
Gigi.
GG. Nice.
How do you feel about that?
I didn't pick it personally. It's grown on me over the years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think you get to pick your grandparent name.
So the way it worked with us is we were not the first to have a grandchild. My oldest brother did.
Yeah.
And so whatever they called
done.
her
It's
is
done
what
deal.
stuck. Yeah.
Unless your children led a revolt. And,
Which we
In my family,
we encouraged, but
that they tried to do that. Younger cousins lived in Hawaii, and they tried to start calling our grandparents whatever the Hawaiian word is for. And I don't remember what it is now. And we were all like, "Nah, that ain't happening." They're already Papa and Grandma. You don't get to change them.
So
you upstarts. What do you think you're doing?
that did happen with my grandparents.
Wow.
Because when I was young, they were just grandma and grandpa, or grandmom and granddad is actually what it was. And then they moved to Germany to become missionaries. I don't remember who it was, but someone started calling them Oma and Opa, which is grandma and grandpa in German. And since then, it just was Oma and Opa. It was wild.
Yeah. I have some members.
Maybe
who
that
are-
would have made more sense
Opa.
if my grandparents had moved to Hawaii, but these were the cousins who moved to Hawaii. They don't get to.
Well, they didn't change their nationality. My grandparents were still American.
Yeah, I don't know. Oma and Opa works better for them. I knew them. That's who they're supposed to be. They were supposed to be Oma and Opa.
Yeah.
I really feel like our podcast is going to lead a national trend to Meemaw and Peepaw or whatever it is.
It started
I
here.
feel like it's starting here, guys. I feel like this is it.
So since we're on the topic, our oldest two we adopted through the foster care system, and so when they named Meg's parents, they're our first children, and they're the first children on that side of the family, and so we couldn't be like, oh, call them this specific thing, because they're only been living with us a week or two. They were still calling us Mr. Shan and Miss Meg this point, right?
Yeah.
And so my oldest, who's now, we adopted, and she just came up with, I'm going to call you Pop and Sunflower. And we couldn't say no.
Yeah.
Sunflowers are pretty sweet.
And it's
grandma
stuck,
name,
and they love it. And
Yeah.
but it's a hard one to explain.
Yeah.
You're like, come here, Sunflower. What'd you just call her? And you're like, that's our Sunflower. I don't, it's a long story.
Yeah.
But it
But
is
hey,
sweet.
now you
It's
can just
sweeter
point
than-
people to this podcast and they'll know the story.
That's true. That'd be a good way
you
for me
go.
to promote the podcast.
That's a good promo. Yeah.
You want to know why? Here's the URL.
have a little QR code. Yeah. In the shape of a sunflower.
It definitely could have been something much stranger that if she just picked it out of thin air, basically. And then she tried to do it for my parents, but there were already grandkids on that side. We said, "Sorry, they're already Papa and Mama. You don't get to do that."
The door's closed.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's get back to Jonah. Here's the thing: Jonah would have never said with his words, "God is only sovereign in Jerusalem," but he clearly said that with his actions.
Yeah.
More than saying God is only sovereign in Jerusalem, he said, let's just be safe and go to Tarshish as far as
away,
possible. Because if I go to the northern kingdom, Israel, God's still got some power there. That's not far enough away. So let's get as far away as possible so that I'm away from the power of God, which he believed, was tempted to believe, was localized to Jerusalem.
Well, and I'll say this about that is, I mean, even to this day, like I'll talk to people every now and then, and even in a very small way, we have that whole sense of like, oh, you shouldn't be saying that in church, right? If you're somehow in the building, there's like some different, like as if God's not God once you step out into the parking lot or something.
You're getting ahead of me, man. Yeah, we're getting
So
there.
I wonder if
Because you hear "don't cuss in church," like it's worse in church. Like God's everywhere, right? You know?
well, I wonder if part of his reasoning was not just if I go 2,000 miles away, that God's arm isn't long enough, but he would have to fight the God of the sea and then the God of this town and this town to get to me.
He's gonna be tired before he gets there.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I like that.
And I want to bring this up, Shan, because I had this conversation like last week with someone. When we talk about gods, all of these city states is kind of what they were, having their own gods. Daniel kind of alludes to that. It's in Daniel 10, and he talks about, it's in verse 13. He says, but the prince of Persia, or the prince of the kingdom of Persia, opposed me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me after I had been left there with the kings of Persia. And like a lot of people will read that and go, that's talking about a demon who was a power principality of this world. Yeah. And so it's not like unquestionable.
Oh, yeah. So I would say that the Bible allows for two categories for the gods, which is either it's an idol, which is made with human hands and you're just talking to wood and stone, and it's dumb, it cannot respond. Or it allows for, that is demonic activity where
there is some power.
Yes, a spiritual power at work, and you're confused thinking that it is on par or equal with God as opposed to subservient to him.
Yeah. And so I wonder if then the reading is like for a Jew, they're going, what Jonah was thinking is it's a matter of power, not of presence. It's not that he didn't think God was everywhere. It's just, did God have the power to defeat these 7 bosses before he gets to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, is that like video game talk?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Got to get through the 7 bosses.
All right, so the reason I think we don't preach and teach this concept to adults is 2 things. Is first, we don't have the assumed cultural practice of territorial polytheism. Because we don't think in those categories, we don't interpret the text through that thing that the original audience would have immediately thought of. But secondly, it seems too infantile. Because we would say, well, our people don't believe God is God at church but not at home, or not God in the Middle East. But even though they would never say that with their words, they still say it with their actions, right? Or sometimes they say it with their words. You can't cuss in church, right? Like that's not different anywhere else, right? But we do struggle with this same issue, even though we wouldn't necessarily call it territorial polytheism. Ultimately, what we're struggling with is the sovereignty of God to some extent, to some degree. The point of Jonah 1 is that God is proving he is sovereign over everything.
Yeah.
And so if I was preaching this, my first point would be after verse 3, I would say God is sovereign over your story. Talking about Jonah's calling, where he wants to send him, how he's gifted him, how he's equipped him. And the same is true for all of us. What God is calling you to do, where he's sending you, how he's gifting you, how he wants to use you for the building up of the body of Christ. He's sovereign over that, and he knows what he's doing. I want to do it a little bit differently this episode. I kind of want to hit some application for each sermon point rather than saving it all for the end. But I would say, do our people struggle with this, believing that God is sovereign over their story? Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. And not necessarily that they have to vocalize it, but we still see it in the way that they act. We could ask them this: where are you safer? answering God's call to be a missionary in the Middle East, or running from God's call by staying back in the States? Where are we safer? And how would the average person be tempted to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas we have these great quotes like from Jim Elliot, who died as a missionary. He said, "We are indestructible until our work on earth is done." Speaking to the sovereignty of God. We have Charles Spurgeon who said, "The safest place in the world is in the will of God."
Yeah.
Which is them just confirming what it says in Psalm 139:16. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. Meaning he has counted our days. We will live exactly as long as God sovereignly chooses to ordain, regardless of whether that is in the Middle East or in the States. We are not safer in one place or the other. We are safest in the will of God. And to doubt that is to doubt God's sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so though we don't believe in what we would say is territorial polytheism, most people think they're safer here than they are in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, I think we've cut the part out where we think there's multiple gods everywhere, but I think what we still have that we hang on to is he still over all these things, or is he just kind of taking a nap up there or something? You know, I think that's what a lot of people kind of struggle with.
Absolutely. The questions we wrestle with are, even if we don't say them, we still feel these in our hearts. Is God really in control? It doesn't always feel that way in a messy world that we live in. And we would say, even if he is in control, can I trust him? Does he care enough about me specifically? Is he really winning this battle between good and evil? It doesn't always feel that way when we look at our world and we look at our culture. Seems like in a lot of ways we're headed more towards evil than good. And those things would have us would cause us to question the sovereignty of God. Even when we think about this, the story that God has given to us, the calling he's placed upon our lives. Is this really the story I get, God? Can't I have a different calling? Can't you gift me differently? Anytime we struggle with these types of questions, we're ultimately struggling with the sovereignty of God. And the answer to any of those temptations would be, please give me greater faith in your sovereignty. Help me to believe that my story is not an accident.
Absolutely.
So he's sovereign over our story. Let's keep reading. Verse 4 now. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. I already told you, but at least in the Canaanite religion, who's the god of the sea? It's Yam. And who is the god of the storm? It's Baal. And so immediately, God is proving that those gods are no gods. He is showing, I am the God of the sea and of the storm and of the dry land. And those will be the exact words that Jonah says at the end of this text, right? So verse 5, then the mariners were afraid, which shows how bad the storm was, right? These are professional sailors. They know when a storm is bad. It says that each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten them. Their experience with storms would give us the indication that they are pretty clear this is a supernatural event. They are worried they're going to die, such the extent that they're throwing their livelihood overboard.
And they're crying out to their gods.
And they begin to cry out to the gods, and they say, all right, let's find out which God has power in this situation, because we need somebody to show up and rescue us.
Hey, this is actually not that easy to teach to kids in America, because when they start throwing their livelihood overboard, could it be tea?
I mean,
Throw the tea into the sea. They probably threw tea into the sea.
This may have been a prequel to the Boston Tea Party going
where
on.
they got it. Okay,
right here in Jonah. Nice.
That was great.
Sean. Nice catch.
I planned that. I set him up for it.
That's great.
All right, so the mariners are losing their minds, but Jonah had gone down again into the inner part of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So Jonah continues to go down and down and down. He's even going to go down into the depths of Sheol, into the depths of the belly of the grave, essentially. And this is describing Jonah's running from God is a clear indication of his spiritual distance increasing from God, okay? But what's happening here? Why is he asleep in the bottom of the ship when it's so bad, right? Well, it's either he thinks maybe he's beyond God's reach, or he thinks it's better to drown in the sea than it is to be tortured to death. I'll take that. If those are my two options, I'll just drown to death. But he's not allowed to have that option. Verse 6, so the captain came down and said to him, what do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish. So we see in the mariners territorial polytheism. They're like, Let's find out what God is powerful here and right now.
Yeah.
We'll try any of them.
Throw it all against the wall, see what sticks.
Exactly. They're willing to try anything. Verse 7, so they said to one another, come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. So casting lots, if you don't know, is kind of like an ancient way of pulling straws or rolling dice. It's a game of chance, which was typically a pagan person's attempt at discerning the will of the gods.
Yeah.
And here, God shows that he is sovereign yet again by controlling how the lots fall. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Once again, God is sovereign. He's in control.
Yep.
Hey, you want to know whose fault it is? It's that guy. Verse 8, then they said to him, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation, and where do you come from, and what is your country, and of what people are you? They recognize this storm is supernatural, and there must be some kind of an explanation based off of the evil in his life that explains why a God is attacking them. Verse 9, and he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, all capital L-O-R-D, meaning Yahweh,
Covenant.
the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land.
And I just want to stop there. We kind of gloss over that, and we know it really well. But if you're ever reading your Bible and you see the word Lord in all caps, that is the Hebrew word Yahweh, or I am, and that was like the name of God.
The proper name of
the proper
the
name
one
of
true God
Covenant.
of Israel.
Yeah,
Right.
the covenant name, the relational name.
Yeah.
And so he said,
Unless you're reading the Holman Christian Standard Bible, then they actually put Yahweh.
and so does the legacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am a Hebrew, and I fear not just God or some Lord. I fear Yahweh, the one true God of Israel. He is the God of heaven and the sea and the dry land. Okay, so this is the answer that we would expect from a prophet of God. But apparently, this was a corrective moment for Jonah. He knew that the right biblical answer was to say that's who God is, but he demonstrated with his actions that he didn't actually believe that. And now God has proven to him
God's setting him straight.
that God is the God
Yeah.
of heaven and the sea and the dry land. It doesn't matter where you try to run, Jonah. You're not getting away from my presence. Okay, God, you've convinced me. I've been taught this my whole life, but now I see it for myself. Jonah wouldn't have admitted it, but secretly he believed that there was some other God in charge of storms. And now he knows that God is the one who is sovereign over your storms. So first, God is sovereign over your story. Second, God is sovereign over your storms. Now, this could lead us in some potential wrong directions, so let's work through exactly what that means. It would be natural for someone to read that and ask the question, does that mean every storm that I'm going through in my life is God's disciplinary action against me? And the answer to that question is in the text. Who is in the storm?
All of them.
Jonah and the sailors. They didn't do anything to deserve this.
Well, I mean, they were pagans.
Well,
so-
okay.
Technically.
But it was God specifically acting against
That's
Jonah.
not why he brought the storm.
Yeah, and they're caught in the crossfire. And so I would say for anybody, if you're in a storm, you could be the Jonah, or you could be the sailors, or you could be in a third category of just living in a broken and fallen world.
Yeah.
And so not every storm is the direct disciplinary action of God. And yet we know God is sovereign over every storm,
Yeah.
right? So if you are in Jonah's spot, and God has hurled a storm at you. That's a radical example, but it could happen. God takes disciplinary action against his children. That is all throughout Scripture. So if you find that you're in that situation, it's because you're being deliberately disobedient to God in some way. The answer is to repent. It's to stop sinning in that way, to stop being disobedient, to turn from that, and to turn back towards obedience and faithfulness. So maybe you're in Jonah's spot, maybe you're in the sailor spot. I would just encourage you, God is still in control. Despite whatever storm you're going through, he's not barely in control. He's not scrambling to keep up. Hebrews 1:3 tells us that he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Everything is held together by the will and the sovereign power of God. So whatever you're going through, it's not a problem for him. He's got it. He's over this. Now, I get it. It's very hard to trust God during storms.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Fanny Crosby, is a hymn writer from a previous generation, wrote some of the greatest hymns, Blessed Assurance, To God Be the Glory, Draw Me Near. She was, due to a medical accident, she was blind from a very, very young age. And that's a terrible thing to happen to you, right? But what she said about that, in hindsight, at older age, she said, one thing I know, Although it may have been a blunder on the physician's part, it was no mistake of God's. I verily believe that it was his intention that I should live my days in physical darkness so as to be better prepared to sing his praises and incite others to do so. I could not have written thousands of hymns, many of which, if you pardon me for repeating it, are sung all over the world, if I had been hindered by the distractions of seeing all the interesting and beautiful objects that would have been presented to my notice.
Yeah.
Perspective
and-
right there. Good night.
And she was like really poor because she was blind and she couldn't work. And yeah, it was like not just that suffering, all of this suffering.
And she says, I trust that God is sovereign over this storm.
Yeah.
This terrible thing that has happened to me, it did not cause her to doubt the sovereignty of, at least in hindsight, with wisdom and with maturity, she was able to say, I trust God despite this terrible thing that has happened in my life. And I see how he has sovereignly used it to accomplish his purposes. And so I just would encourage you in that way, whatever storm you are in or will be coming to you at some point, God has not lost control. He's sovereign over your storms.
Can I guess your third point?
Yeah.
God is sovereign over your sea.
Nope. What would that mean?
Throw the
SEA? Like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
thrown into the sea where you're going
T
to
into the sea.
But what would that metaphorically be, though?
Like when you're drowning?
Okay, that's not it. It does start with an S, though.
Yeah, I figured it did.
Got to.
You can guess which one I had to change so I could keep my alliteration. Okay? Because I did have to change one. All right, verse 10. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord. There it is, repeat it again. Once you see it, it's like, it's so obvious, right? But you need that cultural hole, that assumed knowledge filled in. Verse 11. So they said to him, well, what shall we do that the sea may quiet down for us? For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. Verse 12, he said to them, pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Verse 13, nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to the dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. This is another element of irony. The ones who are acting with integrity, the ones who are being stand-up people in this story are not the people you expect, not Jonah, the prophet of God, but the pagans, right? Verse 14, they called out to the Lord, which is Yahweh, the one true God of Israel. O Lord, Yahweh, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood, for you, O Lord Yahweh, have done as it pleased you. So they've learned to call upon the one true God, right? Verse 15, so they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Which I've always pictured this as kind of an awkward moment. They throw Jonah in the water, the storm stops, and I'm assuming Jonah can swim, and he's just kind of like dog paddling there for a second, and the storm's gone, and they're just sitting there looking at him in the boat, and they're like,
We'll see you.
sorry, Jonah,
Peace out, bro.
bye. And they start rowing away. Like, what else are they going to, not going to bring him back in the boat, right? Anyway, so verse 16, then the men feared the Lord Yahweh exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. So here's another question about that verse. How do we know that this happened? If Jonah is the primary source behind the book of Jonah, he wasn't on the boat with him at this point.
He survived.
Well, Jonah survived, yeah, but he wasn't there to see this happen. This would give us, we already get a very clear indication from the text that they are converted from paganism to worshiping the one true God of Yahweh. But this would also give us a further indication that they go back to Jerusalem and become covenant members of the people of God.
Yeah, potentially.
So they can tell this story.
And he sees them later.
Yeah, maybe he runs. That'd be cool if he runs into him later. Okay.
Or maybe not so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember when I was floating there?
Yeah. Well, I think they'd be mad. Remember when you risked our lives because you didn't listen to
You
God?
jerk.
Yeah. All right, verse 17. The Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So this is actually why I would say this wasn't Jonah's moment of repentance. This is Jonah's moment of theological correction, but not a moment of turning of obedience. It takes him 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish to become obedient.
Yeah.
Okay, can I guess again now? What the third point is?
Wait. First, before we get there, okay, go ahead and guess.
All right, I have 2 guesses. One is, and this is the one that I would think you would have to change. You had to change to make it fit. God is sovereign in your salmon.
Or stomach.
Yeah, okay. Or the other one is God is sovereign in your salvation.
God is sovereign over your salvation.
Nice.
Nailed it.
Nice.
Boom.
I was really voting for stomach, though. I mean, that,
All right, before we unpack that statement, I want to address something which I have found has been a consistent distraction for people when studying the book of Jonah, which is what kind of a fish swallowed Jonah. Have you guys preached through Jonah before?
Twice at 2 different churches.
Oh, nice.
I have, but it's been a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember when studying through the book of Jonah, how much is written on this topic? The amount of ink that has been spilled discussing what kind of a fish swallowed Jonah. Well, the diameter of a blue whale's esophagus is only, or they say, well, the digestive system of a great white shark is much slower than.
Or in India, a person got swallowed by a massive catfish whole and survived.
And it's this ad nauseum discussion, and it just seems to me so ridiculous. Because it's like, guys, think about what we believe as Christians. We believe there was nothing, and God said a word and spoke everything into existence.
Yeah.
We believe that Jesus was dead, physically dead, for 3 days and 3 nights, and God resurrected him to new life. And yet we're struggling. We need to identify exactly what fish is physically capable of sustaining a man's life for 3 days in order to believe the story as historically true. And that, to me, that seems so ridiculous, because the God who spoke everything into existence can easily create one weird fish that has a really wide esophagus and a really gassy tummy. Like, that's not a problem for God.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a fish that we can fish today.
Yeah. It's a mutant fish.
It's a miracle is the whole point. God is sovereign over
The fish.
even the fish, over your salmon.
Yeah. So
It was a salmon.
If you did figure, that's what I was going to ask. Did you figure out which kind of fish? it
No,
was?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't care what.
Then what's the point of the podcast?
It's
if
a
we don't
miracle.
know?
The point is to say, don't be distracted by what fit. Like, to only believe this story as historically true and reliable, if you can point out what fish could do this, is a very strange standard to place, because there's so much about the Bible that is not a scientifically explainable thing, because it's supernatural. It's supernatural. Yeah. So if that's a distraction for you, hopefully this discussion didn't sound dismissive, but let me encourage you not to be distracted by that. God is sovereign over everything, over the storms, over the seas, over your story, over your salmon. And last point, over your salvation. Now, I know that statement.
Sturgeon. Sturgeon are big fish, and that starts with an S.
There you go.
Okay. All right.
Sperm whale.
Yeah, there we go.
That's a whale. I mean,
But would they have
whales have lungs,
No.
so they're not. They're
but
mammals.
would they have made a distinction between? Again, that's not the point. Okay, so
just totally
God is
messing
sovereign over your salvation. Let me anticipate that statement is going to cause a little bit of tension in some people, okay? We struggle historically, even in the last 10, 20 years in the Baptist church, with this tension presented in the Bible between the sovereignty of God and the free will of men. And let me just ask, which do we see in this text? The sovereignty of God or the free will of men?
Definitely see the free. Well, we see the.
It's a trick
sovereignty of
question.
God.
We see both.
Yeah.
Well, it's a trick question. The point of the text is God is sovereign, even though
the free
Jonah
will of
is
man,
Is a goober.
completely disobedient
Yeah.
to the sovereign will of God, right?
Yeah.
And so I would actually say, wrestle with that tension, live in that tension, because God's sovereignty is even more amazing because he accomplishes his purposes not only in conjunction with our choices, but actually despite our free will.
Yeah.
That's what makes his sovereignty so amazing, is we're not a bunch of robots that do exactly what we're supposed to do, and yet he's still able to somehow accomplish what he has willed to accomplish. So rather than bristling at that truth, if that makes you uncomfortable, I would say be encouraged by it.
Yeah.
Be encouraged to share the gospel wherever he sends you, whoever he calls you to share the gospel with. If he can use a disobedient, heretical prophet to save these pagan sailors, surely he can use us.
Yeah.
And though we may not see it, we're not walking blindly when we answer his call to share the gospel. We are partnering with his sovereign power to accomplish his sovereign purpose. And that should encourage us. Yeah. That should actually, the sovereignty of God, rather than making us uncomfortable, should lead us to praise him. If we go back to Psalm 139, it becomes a doxology about God's sovereignty. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is bright as the day, for the darkness is as light with you. So, those are the three S's. God is sovereign over your story. God is sovereign over your storms. God is sovereign over your salvation. Which one did I change so I could keep the alliteration?
I'm going with story.
Storms.
It was story. Originally, it was calling, and then I changed it to story. And I think it works. I don't think that one was
It wasn't that bad of a stretch.
yeah, I don't think I messed
I mean,
it
I
up.
would
Not
clarify if I was preaching it that I actually meant calling.
I did. And if you go back and listen, I did that almost immediately. God is sovereign over your story. And what I mean by that is your calling. Yeah. So what thinking through those categories, those sermon points, any other application points that you would draw from this text?
I think the fascinating thing about the ending of the first chapter, at least, God saves Jonah through this fish, and then he spits him right back out on land. We don't, do we know exactly where on land?
It doesn't tell us.
It doesn't tell us, but
Hopefully closer to Nineveh.
I'm going to say, I want to imagine that it's probably somewhere near where he embarked on that ship.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's got to be somewhere
Back at
close.
Joppa.
Yeah, back at Joppa where he actually got on the ship, and it's just God saying, "Hey, you're an absolute idiot, but I'm going to give you another chance.
Yep.
Since I've proven to you my sovereignty and all those things, why don't we now see if you're ready to actually obey what I have to say and to recognize that I'm the God who's sovereign out in the sea, God who's going to be sovereign in Nineveh." Such an important point for us to get in our lives. We need moments in time where things get difficult and we see firsthand who God is and his sovereignty and his might and his power. But now we can come to it and say, you know what? God's trustworthy. I need to believe that, and I need to go and do what he's asked me to do, you know.
If I were preaching it, I would probably go on to the next chapter so I could say he is sovereign to give you second chances because he spits him up and then allows it. The whale spits him up and God sends him again.
All right, so where is Jesus? Well, Jonah in this whole book really is an antichrist. And I don't mean that in the
end times,
end
Antichrist.
times. No, I mean he does the opposite of what Jesus would do. Jesus is the prophet who was sent and obeyed perfectly. He willingly went to his enemies. Mm-hmm. He's not a prophet who needs to be corrected by a storm. He's the prophet who triumphs over the storm. He's the prophet who was swallowed up by the belly of Sheol so that all of the pagans could be saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Jonah becomes the opposite type of Jesus. Everything that Jonah is, Jesus is the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. And so it teaches us to long for that perfect prophet who was sent by the Father to bring us the message of salvation.
And in Jesus, you see ultimately that God is sovereign over sin and death because Jesus rises up out of the grave.
Yeah.
And so that's
Sin
the
and
sovereignty.
Satan.
In the same-
Another S.
Yeah. I was trying to think of an S for the grave, soil.
Sheol.
Sheol.
Oh, there
Sheol.
yeah,
That's
there
what
you
I
go.
No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that as a yeah.
That's like a cuss word. Sheol.
That's how I meant it.
Oh, good.
All right, we've got to wrap it up. I got to make a phone call. But I do have one thing. Are you done with your thing?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Because I can shed light. In 1827, a beluga sturgeon was caught that was 24
Here we
feet
go.
in length,
Here we go.
almost 3,500 pounds. You can't tell me that thing couldn't swallow.
What's the diameter of its esophagus?
That's the real question.
Well,
How many inches are we talking here?
I don't think they kept records like that in 1827. I could be wrong.
That
But
wasn't the question that they had on top of their minds.
yeah, but they did say that a sturgeon in 2021 that was 11 and a half feet long was 55 inches around. So you just do the math on it. I don't know.
Pi r squared, and then you.
Radius, the diameter. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, folks,
If you out there in listener land know how to determine the diameter of a sturgeon's esophagus based off of its total diameter. Hit us up in the comments.
Oh,
Show us that math.
wait, I know that everybody's concerned about the phone call I have to make. It's because our sink stopped up.
Oh, joy.
I had to deal with this a couple weeks ago.
Hey, God is
it's
sovereign
not-
over your sink.
Oh man, I'm gonna tell Bethany that.
Don't worry, babe. God's sovereign over that sink. And just hang up.
There you go.
All right. So after me is Jason.
Yeah.
So Jason, we need a new AI song generator prompt for the introduction and outro music for your episode.
Yeah. How about show tunes? Like
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be fun.
All right. Like you thinking kind of like class, like The Greatest Showman
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like
absolutely. Like Broadway.
The Music Man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Gotcha.
That'd be fun.
All right. Do I have to end it again?
Yeah,
Can
you have to-
anybody?
No, you
surely
are
one of you can do it.
I think you're the de facto leader.
I want to see one of you try.
All right, I'll try.
Okay.
All right, so thank you so much for joining us for Bears Boys Bible Study Fantastica. Yes, we got it that time. We hope to see you again. Join with us for our next episode. But thank you so much for coming and listening.
Maybe it's an empty hope, but we're going to keep hoping. They can't even get the name of their podcast right. Why are we going to listen to those losers?
Best Boys Bible Study Fantastica. 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 Best Boys Bible Study Fantastica.